2012 began in much the same fashion as the previous year and the one preceding it, as the U.S. economy struggled to recover from the worst downturn since the Great Depression. But in rural America, the stage was set for some commodities to soar into record territory. Despite the 2011 harvest of the fourth largest corn crop in history, supplies were tight. In February, the Agriculture Department cut its February estimates for domestic corn ending stocks to 801 million bushels. That reflected a 30% decline from the previous year, and it left little room for adversity during the 2012 growing season. Livestock producers felt the impact immediately. Retail beef prices spiked as the U.S. cattle herd fell to 90.8 million head, reflecting a 2% decline from 2011 and the lowest inventory since 1952. In March, beef state governors, meat industry representatives, food safety hawks, and a media horde descended on northeast Nebraska. The hastily planned tour of the beef products plant came amidst a public relations nightmare over a product known within the industry as finely textured beef.
Let's call this product what it is, and let pink slime become a term of the past.
Republican governors Terry Branstad of Iowa, Rick Perry of Texas, and Sam Brownback of Kansas launched an all-out media pushback during their visit and seized the opportunity to explain and defend finely textured beef. Lawsuits followed, as did plant closures in 3 states in the wake of the debacle. As the calendar advanced to spring, USDA predicted America's farmers would plant nearly 96 million acres in corn, the most since 1937. Warm and dry conditions enabled growers to plant at one of the fastest paces in history, and initial estimates called for record corn production of 14.8 billion bushels, up 15% from 2011. But as the ink on USDA reports was drying, conditions in America's fields were deteriorating. Some regions went weeks or even months without measurable precipitation, and as record heat gripped much of the grain belt, prospects for record crops wilted, and the worst drought in 50 years quickly became the story of 2012.
We have almost a perfect storm here. We have, and that's in a negative context, because we have corn at the most critical period of time in terms of silking and pollinating. We have very high temperatures, we have very little probability of rainfall, and we have dry soils. Those 3 things combined into this quote-unquote perfect storm are not positive for yield.
In Kansas, where temperatures in some places exceeded 115 degrees in some areas, corn that began the year looking healthy, green, and tall failed to pollinate.
There's just not going to be much there. See, that one mostly didn't pollinate. The ones that did pollinate, a lot of them just don't have any size to them at all. There's just a few kernels on there, most of that.
Crop conditions plummeted across the country, and in its latest estimates, the government predicted U.S. American growers would harvest an estimated 10.7 billion bushels, reflecting a 13% decline from 2011 and the lowest production since 2006. USDA pegged soybean production at 2.97 billion bushels, 4% lower than the previous year and 12% lower than the record year of 2010.
We've all got to be in this together.
2012 also marked the final year of existing laws authorizing federal agricultural programs. But lawmakers failed to come to terms on the massive piece of legislation. In a climate of tightening fiscal policy, budget hawks called for reductions in federal spending. The Farm Bill was no exception, and subsidies known as direct payments, which compensate growers regardless of prices or yields, were an early negotiating casualty. Another key safety net program facing cuts was federal crop insurance, which pays farmers through a combination of government and private funding sources. And Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack explained why the Obama administration preferred to cut safety net programs for farmers over those providing nutritional assistance.
In the President's view, these insurance companies are perhaps in a better position to withstand these difficult times than the folks who are currently struggling with tight budgets and can't afford to put enough food on the table for their families.
Farmers and ranchers often are identified as the primary beneficiaries of the Agriculture Department's $145 billion annual budget. In reality, nearly 75% of spending this year was on programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC, and other nutrition assistance programs.
On this vote, the yeas are 64, the nays are 35. The 60-vote threshold having been achieved, the bill is passed.
In June, the U.S. Senate passed its version of the Farm Bill, eliminating direct payments to farmers and cutting agricultural subsidies and conservation spending by about $2 billion per year. But the Senate measure largely protected 46 million citizens relying on the Supplemental Food Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps. Senate leaders consider the Farm Bill's approval a major victory due to its bipartisan tone and, more importantly, this election year, because of the legislation's considerable savings, which are estimated at more than $24 billion over the next decade.
This is a good bill. Is it the best possible bill? No, it is the best bill possible.
But House lawmakers wanted bigger cuts in nutritional programs. And while the House Agriculture Committee approved a farm bill of its own, the measure proved to be too controversial during an election year and never made it to the House floor. One sector of the economy that improved dramatically in 2012 was energy production, driven by high prices and new, and in some cases controversial, drilling methods. Domestic production of crude and other liquid hydrocarbons was on pace to rise 7% to 10.9 million barrels per day. The improvement marked the fourth year of increased domestic production and reflected the largest single-year gain since 1951. Those facts are not lost on those seeking the presidency, and despite the Obama administration's move to delay a decision on the Keystone XL pipeline until after the elections, the president touted his energy policy.
Since I took office, our dependence on foreign oil has gone down every single year. Last year, we imported 1 million fewer barrels per day than the year before.
And delegates, I accept your nomination for President of the United States.
Governor Mitt Romney and President Obama crisscrossed the nation explaining how they would move Americans from the unemployment lines to the assembly lines. Obama became the third consecutive U.S. president to win a second term. Democrats maintained control of the U.S. Senate, and Republicans held on to their majority in the House. And when the dust settled from the most expensive elections in U.S. history, Congress is still bitterly divided, as evidenced by the current fiscal cliff stalemate.
So until then, thanks for watching. I'm Mark Pearson. Have a great week.
But the story that hit closest to home here at Market to Market happened early in June, when Mark Pearson, the very heart and soul of this program, unexpectedly passed away. Hosting Market to Market for more than 20 years, Mark was a tireless advocate for agriculture, and he never passed up an opportunity to educate others on its importance. Mark loved people. He was blessed with an innate ability to make them feel special and to make them laugh. One of his favorite sources of humor came to fruition in 2011 when he was immortalized as a bobblehead.
And again, one of the fun things we've come up with, and they've been hugely popular. And it's almost embarrassing for me to say it. No, it's not. These have been
the ceramic Mini Mark actually proved to be quite popular and holds special meaning for U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack.
It's a reminder, and now an even more poignant reminder, of uncertainty of life. Every day is a gift, and you've got to make the most of it. I don't think Mark obviously didn't live long enough, but if he were here today, I'm pretty sure he'd come back and say, I didn't waste a day.
Mark loved farming almost as much as he loved people. He was a tenacious worker who somehow always found time to make others feel special. He was gregarious and kind-hearted, yet he took the business of agriculture very seriously. And just as farmers often pass their operations down to their children, Market to Market passed the baton to the next generation in July.
Hello, I'm Mike Pearson. I'm honored to follow in my father's footsteps and Chet Randolph's before him as the host of Market to Market.
And so, despite developments in Washington and in the heartland, and even here at Market to Market, the more things change, the more they stay the same.